Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Asia has been witnessing intense diplomatic activity so far this month, with the G20 summit in Hangzhou just finished, quickly followed by meetings of ASEAN leaders with 8 major powers in Vietnam this week, despite a spat between President Duterte of the Philippines and President Obama after unfortunate remarks Duterte made about the US president. At times, it seems as if the meetings held on the sidelines of these two summits have appeared even more newsworthy than the summits themselves. Take the case of the British Prime Minister Theresa May in Hangzhou, where she reiterated that this is a golden era for UK-China relations and was even able to lay claim that 6 countries, China, India, Mexico, South Korea, Singapore and Australia, used the occasion to raise the idea of trade deals with a post-Brexit UK. So how does a future post-Brexit UK look now after the dust has settled following June's surprise UK referendum result? And what outcomes can we expect from this week's ASEAN meetings? With me in the studio, I'm joined today by author and columnist Anna Tangen and Jia Xudong, who is a senior research fellow with the China Institute of International Studies. But before we start with this background report.
During her visit to China to attend the G20 summit, Britain's new Prime Minister, Theresa May, reaffirmed her desire to push forward a new golden era of relations between the UK and China.
We have built a global strategic partnership with China. I've been clear we will be continuing that global strategic partnership with China. It is a golden era of the relations between China and the UK.
Of all the key points in the bilateral relationship, nuclear power is generating the most headlines. May clearly wanted to dampen down the controversy raised by her suspicions in dealing with China over their Hinkley Point nuclear project. She said, "I've been clear that the decision about Hinkley will be taken later this month." If the deal is ratified, Chinese companies will help build 2 nuclear reactors at Hinkley Point in the southwest of England. Once running, it could supply as much as 7% of Britain's power supply. High-speed rail is also said to be earmarked for $80 billion investment, an ambitious plan to speed up links between London, Birmingham, Leeds and Manchester, cutting travel times by as much as a half. And on the financial side, many expect a big announcement soon on China issuing government debt in renminbi in London. Economic ties have been developing rapidly in recent years. Britain is already China's top destination for investment in Europe. Meanwhile, China is Britain's second largest non-EU trading partner in the world. Tourism is also providing an impetus to the UK's economy, with huge numbers of Chinese holidaymakers breathing new life into the retail sector. And the UK is relaxing its complex visa rules for Chinese tourists. In a survey published by Britain's Daily Telegraph newspaper, asking who will be the UK's most valuable trading partner in 20 years, most Britons voted China. The result was 29%, topping both Europe and North America in the eyes of the public. China-UK ties lie on a firm foundation of economic success, but now it remains to be seen how the two sides can build on it and realise their dream of a golden age.
Welcome back, gentlemen. Does this reference to golden era send any signals?
It is well received actually in China by experts here, by government officials, with the statement made by Prime Minister May on the where this China-UK relationship is moving. People actually here in China are concerned about the future of the atmosphere for investment from China in the UK and China-UK economic trade relations because of her decision to review the Hinkley Point nuclear power plant project. So she actually used the opportunity of coming to Hangzhou for a visit to express give people the sense that, well, she's actually has inherited the policy of former Prime Minister David Cameron to move forward with China-UK relations in a very positive direction. One key phrase used by former Prime Minister Cameron, of course, is he has labeled China-UK relations, used the era of golden era to label the prospect of China-UK relations.
Are you optimistic that the British government, following the Brexit, will honour the promise of the former Prime Minister David Cameron to, first of all, take the bilateral relationship as a golden era, and secondly, continue and sustain the investment in constructing Hinkley Point?
I think the whole issue of Hinkley Point was rather manufactured. The amount of time and energy and planning that went into this, and the future of Britain's electrical grid was very much in part of this thing. Changing that simply because it was not really in the cards. I think what she was doing is using this as an issue because she was coming for the first time to introduce herself to world leaders. She wanted to appear strong. Why? Britain's in a very, very difficult situation. You have a country that runs a $5 billion a year deficit year in, year out. They have been lagging in productivity. The productivity of Great Britain is the same in 2007 as it is today. So there's been little growth. Contrast that with China, whose productivity has been growing 3% a year. And other countries, even the US and others, very much lagging. So they're in a position now where they need to make friends. So I think this bodes very, very well for a Chinese-UK relationship, because they're not going to necessarily get a soft landing from the EU, who I think are still pretty furious that they pulled this stunt with this Brexit.
There have been critical voices coming out of the new British government who want to say goodbye to the era and the policies of George Osborne and David Cameron. To what degree do you think Prime Minister May will keep a distance to please those who criticize her predecessor?
Well, take the Hinkley Point project as an example.
Is that really an issue of security?
Voices were there in the UK to oppose this project on the ground, national security ground. Actually, there have been protests against the project on other grounds, for example, environment and the financing cost to the people there. And Prime Minister May, her government said that they would carefully, review all components of the project, including UK's national security. So, national security is just one of the components of that. But this project itself is good for the UK, and the former government under Prime Minister David Cameron presented quite a number of aspects of benefits for UK, for the economy, for the local community, for the job growth, for the future China-UK relations, the prospect of more and closer economic trade relations, especially more investment from China in the UK. So will Prime Minister May walk back from this prospect? And at the end of the day, actually, this project is, will provide safe, clean, and reliable energy to the UK, to also create hundreds of thousands of jobs there and provide power to about 6 million homes for 60 years. Will she walk away from this project?
Well, don't get me wrong. I might have sounded a little harsh with Theresa May, but I'm not at all. I think I admire her strategy going into this. First thing she did coming into the government was appoint all those people who were responsible for Brexit to front bench seats. I mean, Boris Johnson is now, ironically, the person in charge of foreign affairs. I think by putting these people up front, they are also the first ones for the chopping block if things are not going the way it's supposed to go. So I think she's done a masterful job of doing very much with very little, especially the hand that she's been given. In terms of the security thing, I think that's fallacious. The truth is that these issues were hashed out under Cameron's government. There was a huge hue and outcry about what would this mean for the security of Britain, and this was delved into at great length. So yes, she's taking an issue and she's manufacturing a chip, but in the end, I don't think that she's going to bet with it. I think she's going to go along with the status quo. She's looking for partners, not enemies at this point.
She deserves credit for maintaining subtle equilibrium domestically for the politics. However, lurking behind the dramatic scenario of either Hinkley Point or UK assuming leadership in persuading other neighboring European countries to join AIIB, the United States has been always unhappy about the growing rift, if any, in the transatlantic relationship. Recently, German Vice Chancellor said, sorry, the TTIP negotiations have basically failed. Now, what do you think of the policy of Prime Minister May towards the United States, or the other way around, in shaping the new and fragile relationship across the Atlantic Ocean? Well, because the Prime Minister David Cameron said, we would love to play a critical role of a bridge between the United States and China, because these two biggest economies are increasingly at loggerheads for one reason or another.
Well, the bridge scenario was more like a toll booth. They want to collect from both sides. But seriously, a lot is going to depend on this election. I mean, there could be a very, very different world if we wake up and Donald Trump is in fact the president. He's made it very clear that he's going to pursue a very isolationist policy. He's going to pull back from NATO. He's going to do all of these things. He's going to pull back from the Pacific. So it'll be a very, very different world. If Hillary Clinton is president, it probably will be a continuation, largely intact, of the Obama policies, which have not always been that successful. That means that they'll continue. But the difference is that TPP will be dead on arrival when if she arrives in the White House first. So it'll be a retrenchment period for relations and attitudes towards the Pacific, and particularly in China.
Let's generalize. By the way, I hate to generalize a discussion, but let's take a general attitude towards what's going to happen to the post-Brexit UK in terms of its foreign policy, its domestic politics and economy. You praised Prime Minister May for being a strategist in arranging the front bench sitters or members of parliament. But what else would you say about the post-Brexit UK?
Post-Brexit UK is an unknown, and if I knew what was going to happen in Brexit and I could make financial bets on it, I could price out large yachts and small countries. The fact is, we don't know how it's going to settle out. Now, a lot of people within Britain who I've been talking to say, look, it hasn't been as bad as we initially thought. Things are just kind of going on. When you go about your day-to-day life, nothing seems to have changed. But the true fallout from this will depend a lot on what happens to the city, because that $5 billion a year deficit that England's been running for, Great Britain's been running for all these years, has only been made up by the financial services industry that it's had. But given that they have this flat productivity is related to your future income. If you're not producing more, you're not being competitive, and there's no more disposable income. If that doesn't improve, there's going to be a serious fallout and a degradation in the British economy. So she has to think of new ways of energizing her country.
Thank you very much. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Jia Qiudong and Mr. Anna Tang. We're discussing a new relationship which seems very fragile due to Hinkley Point between the new British Prime Minister and Beijing. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at what has happened in Vientiane, the site for two major events, ASEAN meetings and the East Asia Summit meeting, where President Obama vowed to solve the legacy about the Vietnam War. We're going to see and figure out what would be the major issues on the agenda. Stay with us.
From a low base 25 years ago, trade between ASEAN and China has continuously surged. Today, ASEAN does more trade with China than any other country, while ASEAN is China's third biggest trading partner. On the strategic side, China has held joint humanitarian aid and disaster relief and military exercises with ASEAN countries in recent years. Two-way tourism has boomed, educational ties strengthened. What has been slower to take off is China's investment into ASEAN, though that looks like changing with the One Belt, One Road initiative.
All of this is beneficial to ASEAN countries. So I personally believe ASEAN countries, compared with the rest of the countries along the Belt and the Route, ASEAN country will be the earlier, get the earlier harvest.
China already has an enhanced free trade agreement with ASEAN, but along with Japan, South Korea and others, is looking to take that to the next level by forging a regional comprehensive economic partnership, or RCEP. The parties want two-way trade to hit $1 trillion a year by 2020.
RCEP will help the both sides to realize the goal, and by expanding the bilateral trade between ASEAN and China, the welfare of regional people, the stability of political and society of the country, of regional countries, will be benefited.
Many believe that strong economic interdependence will help ensure the one blot in relations, the South China Sea issue, isn't allowed to boil over.
Regional cooperation finally is what we deliver to the people in terms of public services, in terms of benefit. So this in terms of better economic returns. So I think there could be stronger mutual investment, China, ASEAN, better human resources, exchanges to uplift, so that finally both sides could create a stronger, bigger middle class that can create wealth for both sides.
Even more of the same, please. In other words, as China and ASEAN look toward the next quarter century of partnership.
Welcome back, gentlemen. Is it a successful Chinese diplomacy in Vientiane where a joint statement by ASEAN member countries failed to mention the ruling of July the 12th about the South China Sea? Is that a success, or do you think, well, it's no big deal?
Well, I won't label this as a victory of Chinese diplomacy. Actually, I think that it's the victory of the common sense of the whole ASEAN community. That is, actually, ASEAN nations leaders know what's in the best interest of ASEAN and the future of China-ASEAN relations. They know that, well, the South China Sea issue is very complex and difficult, but they should not let the South China Sea issue stand in the way of cooperation between China and ASEAN. And China and ASEAN actually have channels to deal with this issue. For example, they can continue to talk about a code of conduct, and they have a plan, a roadmap for that. And also they can, have areas of cooperation where they can, actually turn this zoning issue into actually an area of cooperation between China and ASEAN. They have plans for that. So actually, it is the success of the consensus of the ASEAN nations.
Is it a serious setback for the United States, which insists that the ruling must be complied?
Well, the U.S. position is very difficult since it's not a member of UNCLOS. It is not a signatory to UNCLOS. So insisting that everyone should abide by something they're not willing to abide by always brings up this contradiction. In terms of this issue, yes, for now it's okay, and I think it is a testament to this idea of consensus government, which I think is the new thing that China is trying to push, this idea that we don't draw lines. What we do is we sit until we can agree, and then we go forward. It's the only way you can do it realistically internationally. But long term, there still is going to have to be some sort of resolution to what the 9-dash line means, how this is going to work out in terms of the things, and China's ambitious trade agenda, which are sometimes seem at odds with this.
What generates headlines, I'm afraid, is the spat between President Obama and President Duterte about the words like a son of bitch. That's indeed very sensational for the newly elected head of the Philippines. Do you think the Philippines stand ready to find a diplomatic solution to the territorial disputes between Beijing and Manila?
So far, President Duterte has said that, well, he keep to the approach of dialogue with China, and the two sides actually have.
Well, first of all, did he apologize to President Obama for saying such things like "son of bitch"?
Well,
and President Obama canceled the
did.
meeting with him.
Well,
He did.
He did apologize.
Yeah, of course.
But excuse me, before we talk about South China Sea and the diplomatic solutions between PRC and the Philippines, under what circumstances did he say words like SOB describing President Obama? That's indeed very serious, because these two countries are mutual allies.
I watched his speech and his remarks. Actually, people focus their attention on on the SOB curse part of his statement remark. Actually, in his remarks, I also noticed that he said that showed why he used that kind of undiplomatic kind of wording. He said that I'm no American puppet. I'm the president of a sovereign country. Actually, he has been defending his own way of doing things domestically in the Philippines, cracking down on the drug dealings and so on. So actually, he's defending himself against criticism from the U.S. government and the U.S. Media. He has shown that he's no fan of U.S. Foreign policy in some aspects. Recently, we know that he criticized the U.S. Diplomatic practices in the Middle East, in Africa, even the history of U.S. diplomacy in the Philippines itself. It shows that he has different views of how to engage, carry out domestic agenda and how to approach diplomatic agenda, including actually the South China Sea issue.
So the United States does not see eye to eye with President Duterte about running domestic issues, solving domestic issues in the Philippines, like gun-related violence, not gun-related, but drug-related violence. And the United States accused President Duterte of violating some of the legal procedures.
Well, no, let's just be very, it's very simple things. What happened is he had a drug crackdown. Many people have died. President Obama said that he was going to raise this issue of human rights with Duterte, and Duterte exploded. He was very angry at this because he says, listen, you have your own problems in the U.S. You have people being shot on the pavement in plain sight, unarmed. Don't lecture me about these particular things. So it was genuine anger that he was feeling at the time. No excuse for calling another leader such words. But the issue is, the U.S. is suffering a little bit in its setback on this whole idea of this pivot to Asia. It is not winning the hearts and minds, particularly things. Now, Duterte, whatever you say about them, he has a 90% plus approval rating within the Philippines right now. They appreciate the fact that for the first time, the criminals are not being able to hide behind the laws that are actually supposed to protect the people, and that he's willing to do something about it. Now, the methods, not good. Can we applaud them? No. But the issue is these people are fed up with being at the mercy of these drug dealers.
The U.S. government has accepted the apology from President Duterte about the SOB allegation. Now, President Obama has canceled the meeting in Vientiane with Duterte, but he, through the spokesperson of the White House, said that meeting could take place in the future, next time. Does it mean that the United States will never ever give up, their mutual defense treaty that was first signed in 1951 to defend the U.S. presence in the South China Sea so that its primacy could be well protected?
Southeast Asia is a key, or the key area where actually President Obama has carried out this rebalancing strategy. And also Philippines as a key ally of the U.S. Of course, the United States will not give up the Philippines. Also, the Philippines needs the U.S. economically and politically. So their relationship will not suffer fundamentally because of this spat, diplomatic kind of spat. Of course, because of fundamental differences actually in the views of how to look at the domestic actions by President Duterte, and they have different political, diplomatic views. So there will be differences, there will be some quarrels in the future.
Right, the next issue is Laos. It's the first time for a U.S. president to make an official visit to this country, which was heavily bombed during the Vietnam War. Of course, the U.S. government denies that it's directly involved in the bombing. However, many articles said this is the product of CIA engineering. A lot of unexploded munition got to be solved. The U.S. government promises to provide Laos with $90 million, helping them to defuse those ammunition. What do you think of the prospects of improving the relationship between Washington, which is viewed by many observers as an integral part of the U.S. campaign to drive a wedge between China and ASEAN member states.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're talking about 2 million tons of ordnance that was dropped on Laos, 1/3 of which never exploded. It's been killing people. It used to be 60 a year. Now it's about 40 a year. 40% of those are children. It's an ongoing issue of safety. It should have been dealt with a long time ago. The difficulty was the war in Laos was a secret war. It was waged off book.
Covert operations.
It was a covert operation to stem the flow of arms and munitions to the Viet Cong at the time that were running along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We recruited a lot of people. Some of them were the Hmong. They fought for us. They ended up being, most of them, quite a few of them being slaughtered. Very, very difficult situation. I don't think this is enough. Laos is not only looking to have the wrongs of the past righted. I think they're looking for economic things, how to go forward. So you cannot just contribute to one end and ignore the other. And this is where I think China has the advantage.
It's not the legacy, it's not just the issue of a Cold War legacy. It's also about the media speculation that the new government in Laos is leaning toward Hanoi, which also raises competing claims about the South China Sea. What do you think of the realignment between some of the members of ASEAN? Do you think this is a threat to China's diplomacy?
Well, no, I don't think look at the issues that way, because for the issue of Myanmar, and several years ago people said, well, Myanmar was walking away from China because of because the United States came in and the U.S. president visited them. Well, actually, I believe that China is very confident, actually. China has very strong relations with ASEAN, all ASEAN, most ASEAN countries, despite all the differences, and because we are neighbors, close neighbors, China has this kind of win-win and cooperation kind of approach in its policy towards these countries. So this country will realize, actually they're aware that, well, China's presence is good and productive and constructive there, despite some differences there.
I want to add one thing. I mean, Kofi Annan just recently went there and he was booed in Myanmar because he's dealing with the issue involving the Rohingya. Now, in that particular situation, there are a lot of countries who are now within ASEAN who are rejecting this idea that outside powers should be coming into their country, judging them and telling them what to do. So this is increasingly becoming an issue. The fact that China does not inquire into the internal things is a plus for China in the long run, because these countries do not want to be judged by others, obviously.
You mean most of ASEAN member countries refuse to take side on the issue of South China Sea, except for the Philippines and Vietnam. Well, that's a very heavy topic. We're ready to discuss this next time. Until then, goodbye.